Okay, good morning, everyone. Joining us from different places, Scotland. I know that people from Malawi and different countries. You are all welcome. My name is Nasim Padalia, and I'm the Communications and Engagements Officer here at the SMP. You are all welcome to this Malawi at 60 Governance Series. So this is our first webinar over the series the webinars that are going to be happening. And before I hand over to the chair of the meeting, Stuart, I just wanted to do a few housekeeping run. Would you please remain muted? Make sure your mic is muted until you're asked to speak. That's when you can unmute yourself. You are also free to introduce yourself in the chat. Just let us know who you are, where you're from. If you're comfortable doing that, you can do that in the chat box. It'll be open for that. And if you could just also please note that this meeting is being recorded and everything that we are going to do or we are going to share will be shared on our website and on our social media pages. So if you're remaining in the meeting and if you say something, just it means you've given us that consent to publish whatever you have said. This time I will hand over to Stuart. Over to you.
Thank you, Nasim. Well, good morning and welcome. Malawi-led and member-led, this six-part webinar series is based around the forthcoming publication, Malawi at 60, A Political and Economic Analysis. This book is edited by Gift Wasambo Kaira, Kenneth R. Ross, and Mzee Herman Yokanaya Mvula. The goal of the book, and indeed of the webinars, is to offer an objective account of Malawi's successes and failures, strengths and weaknesses, achievements and challenges in a broad array of areas impacting the nation and its people. We, the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, or SNP, are a membership organisation which exists to support, connect and represent the many individuals and organisations in Scotland that have dignified people-to-people links with Malawi. Our Malawi-based sister organisation is the Malawi Scotland Partnership, or MASP. We are a charity, or NGO, and politically neutral. We receive funding from the Scottish Government, but are independent of them, and they don't fund any activities we undertake around governance. We think that there's great importance in governance, and today's activity in the series is funded by SNP membership fees. Today's title is 60 Years of Continuity and Change in Malawi's Political Culture, an historical institutional analysis of Malawi's political landscape 1964 to 2024. We shall hear from Ms. Maureen Linda Kapanga and Professor Happy Mickson Kayuni. There will be an opportunity to ask questions and make brief, respectfully put comments, so please do store these up as we listen or type them into the chat function. Maureen Linda Kapanga is a lecturer in the Department of Politics and Government at the University of Malawi. She holds a Master of Arts and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the same institution and is currently pursuing a PhD at Northwest University, South Africa. Her teaching and research focus on political science, public administration and governance, with a strong publication and conference record on land reform, traditional leadership and service delivery in Malawi. Professor Happy Mickson Kayuni is Professor of Political Science and Executive Dean of the School of Law, Economics and Government at the University of Malawi. He holds a PhD from the University of the Western Cape and an MPA from Stellenbosch University. His expertise includes political governance, public administration and development policy. He has authored over 70 peer-reviewed publications and led key national policy drafting initiatives. Ms. Kapanga and Professor Kayuni invite us to address them as Maureen and Happy, and so may I please now pass over to you, Happy, as I believe you're going to lead off in the webinar today. You're still muted. There we are. Great.
Morning, everybody. I hope you are able to hear me.
Good morning. Yes, very well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Stuart, and everybody else for giving us this opportunity to share some ideas about Malawi. I have previously also done a presentation on the previous book sponsored by Scotland-Malawi Partnership. So it's exciting to once again participate in this initiative. We have agreed with Maureen that I should start the ball rolling, and she will come in later. Let me ask if you can beam the slides. Can we start from the beginning? I think I am seeing a slide which is not from the, it's a slide number 5 or 3 or something like that.
Bear with me a moment. Let me get it back to where it belongs. Sorry about that.
Our viewers, I just want to mention that due to some technical issues, I'm not in control of the slides now, but I will be asking my colleague Stuart to be moving from one slide to the other. So if I will be saying next, don't be bothered by those words. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so this is our presentation. I'm known for not being a very good timekeeper, so I'll try to skip some of the things as I'll be presenting, just to make sure that my colleague Maureen should also have ample time. Let's move on to the next slide, but that's the title of our presentation. And this is the outline. I'll do a brief introduction and some conceptual grounding on political culture, and then move on to historical institutionalism. And then I'll touch on the one-party rule from 1964 to 1994. I should make it clear that we didn't have the one-party rule from 1964. This is just a popular way of categorizing the political dispensation in Malawi. But actually, we had a multi-party system by 1964. One-party rule was after some years later when we had our constitution amended so that we should have MCP as the only recognized party in Malawi. So it was not 1964 per se. I just wanted to make that clear. And there's a footnote in our actual paper. We are explaining that. But here, just for the sake of not going too deep into the debate, one-party rule did not necessarily start from 1964. I just wanted to clarify that. And then my colleague will continue with the transition to multi-party democracy and the continuity of political culture, and then we'll conclude. Next slide. Yeah. So basically, this paper critically analyzes Malawi's continuity and change in political culture over the period of 6 decades. I'm going to explain later what the challenges associated with the coming up with an overall kind of definition or characterization of a political system over 6 decades, the challenge of doing that. I'll explain that just to make sure that we should appreciate some of the shortfalls of coming up with an overarching political culture over a longer period like this one. But what is critical in our analysis is the issue of patronage and the clientism. So these are some of the elements that in our paper we are looking at as the major overarching themes as far as political culture in Malawi is concerned. So we are also engaging the historical institutionalism So this one is an approach which tries to emphasize the impact of historical processes on the development and behavior of institutions. So in this case, we will be forced to go back beyond 1964. So we'll be looking at the colonial legacies and then the post-independence, authoritarian and the subsequent democratization efforts, and how they have shaped the political landscape. So as I mentioned, our focus is patronage and the clientelism as some of the key elements that have defined the political landscape in Malawi. They are not the only ones, as I've already explained before, but in our view, these are the major overarching themes that have dominated the political landscape in Malawi. We are also going to talk about a little bit about path dependency and what is also known as the critical junctures. These are important in explaining historical institutionalism. I will explain a little bit about that. So this paper is based on a literature review of Malawi's governance and political culture. Next slide. Yeah, so when we are talking about political culture, I know that the audience is too diverse. We are not all coming from a background of political science, etc. So I will try as much as possible to highlight I will spend more time on the issue of political culture. We agreed with Maureen that we should spend more time also on political culture, taking into consideration that the audience is not necessarily fully grounded in politics. So we need to be on the same understanding of what we are talking about. So it refers to the set of attitudes, beliefs, values, and norms that people in a society have towards politics, government, and authority. So basically, it shapes how their citizens view their roles in political systems, how they interact with political institutions, and how they respond to political events and leaders. So that defines what we mean by political culture. So some of the key elements in the political culture include beliefs about authority, attitudes towards participation, views of power and governance, national identity and pride, expectations from government. Next slide. So when you're talking about, for example, on expectations from government, it's an issue whereby the way people react to when government has done something, and you see in the papers, etc., how people react. The same incident, if it happened in another country, the reaction might be different. So one of the reasons could be the political culture. The political culture will explain how people react to certain things. But you see, as I mentioned in the introduction, political culture is not something that can easily be analyzed. There are certain limitations, there are certain challenges about analyzing political culture. We don't want just to pose as if it's something that can easily be done. So there are several challenges. Some of the challenges associated with political culture, apart from the points I'm highlighting there on the screen, one of the challenges of analyzing political culture is that you see, politics itself has several dimensions. You are talking about issues of participation, elections. You are talking about institutions like how the judiciary and the other institutions, how they are interacting. You are looking at the politics, etc. So in other words, there are too many cultures within the political realm. So it is coming up with an overarching political culture to define a certain polity is not easy, because there are too many cultures. Too many cultures. Even in a house, you know, in a family, you discover that you cannot easily define a culture that prevails or norms or values that prevail in one particular family, because it depends on what you are talking about. Is it about how they share resources? Is it about how they make decisions on a particular issues, certain issues? So about religion and so on. So you can see that there are too many, in quotes, I can say, cultures within a particular polity. So coming up with something that is an overarching definition is not easy. And so basically what we are saying here is that culture is abstract and vague in nature. So political culture involves beliefs, values, attitudes, which are intangible and difficult to measure precisely. So that is the problem. And also there are cultural and historical specificity. For example, political culture is deeply shaped by historical, colonial legacies, ethnicity, religion, making cross-country comparison complex and often misleading. For example, you see that the northern part of Malawi, some of the northern parts of Malawi have had a lengthy interaction with the missionaries, the Scottish missionaries, etc. Some areas didn't have, especially in the central region. It was after some years. And in the south, we see that the missionaries were also established some years back. You discover that at the end of the day, the interaction with the missionaries led to a particular culture developing in those particular areas, which might be different from areas where they didn't have that interaction until after some years. So you see that the political culture is determined by so many factors, and within a polity, the interaction with those factors may not be the same. So that is another reason why it is a challenge. There are certain limitations. And there's also related to that, the risk of overgeneralization, and also the dynamic and evolving nature. So political culture is not static. In other words, it changes over time due to political events. And we are going to explain about the critical juncture. It's an element within, within historical institutionalism. So the political events can change the culture itself and so on, media influence and so many other things. And also the influence of political elites. So they shape political discourse, creating a gap between official narratives and actual public beliefs, complicating efforts to discern authentic political culture. So sometimes we call what we sometimes we political scientists might say political culture may not necessarily reflect the views of public beliefs. It might reflect the views of the political elites. So the views of the political elites may be defined as a political culture. Next slide. So sometimes there's that challenge. Are we talking about the leadership or the elites, or we are talking about the public? Anyway, but the England makes an important statement. It says an important argument, well, it brings out an important argument when it says that circumstances under which political culture emerge and are fostered are profoundly historical. So according to England, which is also supported by many other scholars, is that history matters, in other words. And that's why in our paper, we are bringing on board the element of historical institutionalism. So we are, next slide, because we feel that the historical element is critical. Now, what do we mean by Malawi's political culture? That's now the heart of the issue now. We can say when we are doing our research, we discovered that the major overarching theme that was coming out constantly is about defining, we can say Malawi's political culture can be defined as chameleon politics. Now, this is mainly coming from the work of England 2002. So they have said that based on that, they say Malawi's politics is that which can be defined as a chameleon politics, or it exhibits chameleon tendencies. So England argued that continuities between the old and the new Malawi are too obvious. And let me underline the word too obvious there. That when you look around Malawi politics, it cannot entirely be divorced from the past, from what we have gone through as a nation. That's why you see the theme, the topic of our presentation. Our presentation is talking about from 1964 to 2024. Why? We are in line with the argument of England that you can't fully divorce the past from Malawi's current political dynamics. And Mapanje also said, even in Malawi's autocracy, one changed one's colors like the chameleon. You know, he wrote a poem, as you are aware, about chameleon, a political one for that matter. And also Kayuni and Tumblers in the wake of 2010, they were looking at the issue of the cabinet crisis. And they used also this narrative of the chameleon politics. And of course, it was coined in another way. They were saying it's perpetual regression of trust, but it was based on chameleon politics, and they were analyzing the genesis of the cabinet crisis and its aftermath. So other notable scholars have gone beyond that. Some have, although we are saying that the recurring theme has been chameleon politics, our research has shown that the other scholars, next is a slide. And specifically, when you look at chameleon politics, they have looked at issues like, for example, am I audible? Because okay. So when you look at those authors who have looked at political cultures, that of chameleon, they have given examples of politicians who have switched sides with ease, and I underline the word ease. You know, they have switched from one to the other political colors with ease. And I will not explain those pictures. If you know Malawian politics, you understand what those pictures are saying. Next slide. The same picture, I mean, is also highlighting the chameleon politics, which so the chameleon politics is not just about switching sides from one political party to the other, but even ideas, whatsoever, everything is more of a chameleon. That's how they have defined it. Next slide. But now we went beyond the chameleon type of analysis. And based on our study, we looked at several other, even England himself and others. We looked at some of their works, and we found out that there are other cultures that have also come out in the analysis. The first one being authoritarian political culture, and that is rooted in Banda's one-party rule, which emphasized obedience to authority, and there are several characteristics there. And that one is obvious, so that authoritarianism has been very common across Africa and Malawi inclusive. And during the one-party era, that was the theme. They have defined it that way. Others have talked about the strongman leadership or big man rule. So the big man rule is it's not exactly authoritarian type of political culture, but it's an adaptation. It is in other words, we can say an improvement, making sure that somehow you try to abide to the democratic principles a little bit, but still maintain some kind of authoritarian type. So some people have analyzed, for example, decision-making in political parties, etc. You see that almost all political parties, almost all of them, are dominated by a certain person. They control finances, they control everything. They may have committees, national executive committees, but in reality, they are as good as useless. The big buana, or some have called it that way, the big buana or big man rule. So they are the ones who make the decisions. So that's the type of political culture that even when you go to the village, you listen to the chief, the traditional leader, the buana, you know, the buana has to say, make decisions, but it's not really authoritarian type. It's an adaptation. It tries to give some semblance of democracy. So it will still accept the language is democratic, but the practice is not really. So we can say hybrid system, if we want to define it from a democratic point of view, types of democracy, but I don't want to go into that debate. But basically, our research was trying to look at the political culture. So the strong man or big buana type of, so it goes across even in organizations. If you are a CEO in a certain organization, or a public sector, especially in the public sector, you have to abide by what the Bwana will say. So nothing like a participatory kind of thing. It is there on paper, but when it comes to the real action, it's the big Bwana mentality type. So it's an adaptation of the theory. And then there's the patron-client culture. That's the one we have highlighted in red because that's the one we want to focus on. Our belief is when we are doing our research, it clearly showed that when you look over time, it is actually the patron-client type of culture that has prevailed in the Malawian polity. That is our analysis. And so it is characterized by vote buying, expectation of benefits, politicized development. That's the type of patron-client type of politics. And that is our major argument, that the chameleon type, because of time, we will not be able to go into details to explain why each one of those cultures may not necessarily be the most dominant as portrayed by Ingrid and others. But we are feeling that we feel that the client, patron client, is the one which is can be regarded as one overarching political culture, cutting across from 1964 to the present, and we can go beyond the 1964 to 1891, etc. Then there's ethno-regional political culture, and there's a participatory. In the interest of time, I will not go through all those political cultures that have prevailed in the system. But the major point which I want you as a take-home message from this analysis is that our argument is that the patron-client political culture is the one. We are not discarding the other cultures, but they have limitations. And when you look at the patron client, is the one which has dominated for a long time. Others were dominant for a particular period of time, but not necessarily cutting across from the whole spectrum of our political history. Next slide. Yeah, this one, I'm checking my time now. It seems I'm running out of time, but we can just move on to the next slide. Yeah, so we just also wanted to explain that the patron-client type of culture is not necessarily something that is only prevalent in Malawi, according. So you see, Mazrui and Young, some of the well-known political analysts who looked at the political culture. These are classics as far as political culture in Africa is concerned. And they have highlighted that there's a fusion of indigenous versus and Western traditions. And Young also argued that colonialism actually deeply shaped the local political systems. And we agree with some of these arguments that they are putting forward. When we are, let's move on to the next slide. So when we are talking about patronage, it refers broadly to the distribution of state resources, such as jobs, contracts, or positions by political leaders to supporters, often based on loyalty rather than merit. So it is typically top-down and used to build or maintain political coalitions. But when you are talking about clientelism, it is a more personalized and a reciprocal relationship where an individual, the client, that's why it's clientelism, receives a specific, often small-scale benefits. So it can be food, cash, services from a more powerful actor who is now the patron. So in exchange for political support, usually in form of votes. So in short, what we are saying is that Patronage is about rewarding supporters with public resources at a broad or institutional level, while clientelism is about individualized transactional relationship between a patron and a client. So, so they are almost the same, but there's a slight difference. Let's move on to so I mentioned that our analysis of political culture is rooted in this theory known as historical institutionalism. So, assuming you don't, I will not, you will not hear, I mean, you will not be able to understand whatever I'll say about historical institutionalism. There is one famous quotation which refers to historical institutionalism. It says, history matters. That is the major question. I mean, that is the major summary about historical institutionalism, that history matters. Sometimes it is so, we unconsciously do certain things without knowing that it's history which is influencing what we have, our experience, or we as individuals, what we have gone through, or what our ancestors went through. So over the years, we have developed a certain pattern of doing certain things. So that's why in historical institutionalism, there is what we call path dependency. So what happens is that what we did in the past, the decisions we made in the past will define what we'll also be doing now, or the way we behaved previously. We know human beings do not like surprises. So the way, for example, you woke up today, maybe, for example, if you go to the gym first, or you do some religious activities, and then you take a shower, and then you read a newspaper, and then you go to the office. That is a routine which you have established. Human beings want a particular pattern, want to operate in a certain pattern. And even institutions, the way they are established, they are political institutions as well, they are established in such a way that they want to operate in a certain pattern. So that's why we have constitutions, we have institutions that have to make certain decisions. So when they are making decisions, they refer to what they did previously. So that's what we call a path dependence, so that earlier decisions entrench our practices. So sometimes there, as I mentioned, it's not always what is written, but we say, okay, we need to make this decision. What is it that we did previously? Sometimes it is done subconsciously because of what we went through, or what our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents went through. Then automatically we end up doing that. So there is a path that is made for a particular polity. So there are certain decisions of the way people behave politically in the UK may not be exactly the same way they behave in Malawi. Why? Because the experience, the historical experience in the UK and the historical experience in Malawi is not exactly the same. So the way people will behave, they are reacting to a certain path that was curved, that was done by previous individuals or institutions. So we are just following that, either consciously or subconsciously. So it's the same way a culture develops because of our experience, because of our interaction with certain rules and regulations, then we end up behaving in a particular way. So that becomes our path. But now it doesn't necessarily mean that the path is cast in stone, that it will always be like that forever. So there's what also we call a critical juncture. What do we mean by a critical juncture? So a critical juncture is a crisis or a major event that can shake the system so that people start questioning their path to say that, is this path correct? Is it what we were doing good? So people now start re-evaluating themselves. And in the process, they may change their path. So that's what we call a critical juncture. Now, in politics, we have had critical junctures like independence in 1964. We can say, if we can go back to 1891, Malawi, of course, by then, before 1891, we didn't have the Malawi that we have now, the boundaries that we have. But that was a critical juncture because it shaped the current contemporary Malawi. The first time that we encountered what we call the Westphalian model of the state, and it started, in fact, the national identity of what Malawi is started from 1891. Before 1891, there was no Malawi. There was no identity of Malawi. So it is a critical juncture. And there were several other critical junctures within up to 1964. 1964, when we gained independence, that is a critical juncture. We had our new government, and we started operating in a certain way, a certain culture is evolved. 1994 is also regarded as a critical juncture. So there are other critical junctures within. Some have talked about, for example, the 2020 presidential elections, rerun, is also a critical juncture. So we have had several critical junctures that will shape the way, change the way we do certain things. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the critical juncture will always change the path profoundly. Sometimes, and that's the major argument in our paper, that sometimes the critical juncture just modifies the way things were being done previously. So, for example, if I'm wearing a black top, and I can buy exactly the same one, but it will be a red color. So it will be a change, but that change is just a modification. So sometimes people fail to change. The change cannot be so profound that it's just cosmetic sometimes, or it can just be what we can say, there's some modification, but the pillars of what defined who you are or what you do remain the same, but there's some modification. So that's what can happen. And that's our argument in our paper, that we have gone through critical junctures, but what we have seen are just some kind of modifications. We haven't really dealt with the major pillars which defines the political culture. They are still there. They are still standing. They are still confronting us. They are still challenging us. So that is the major argument that we are putting forward in our paper. Next slide. Yeah, so we are using this analytical framework. As I said, the historical institutionalism, I have already explained this, so, but it is highlighting the path dependency and the critical junctures and how they are affecting the issue of clientelism and patronage. Next slide. Yeah, so what is it that was happening in the colonial period? So our analysis, as you saw in our paper, we are talking about 1964 to 2024. However, we felt that it will be important, because we are using historical institutionalism, we should not just start from 1964, it would be unfair to our analysis. And we felt that we should go beyond 1964. So that's why we went beyond 1964 so you see, when I will try to, I know we don't have much time, but I will try to to go through this very quickly. When you look at 1891, as you are aware, that Malawi, the British were not interested in colonizing Malawi, by the way. I hope we are aware of that. They were not interested. What happened is that the missionaries who were already here in the country were lobbying for British administration. Why? Because they were British, and they felt they needed the protection of the British government. There was a threat from the Portuguese. As you are aware, Malawi is almost half surrounded by Mozambique, which was controlled by the Portuguese. And the Portuguese wanted a large part of this country. And there was that threat. And so the missionaries they didn't want to be under the authority of the Portuguese, because they were British citizens. And they wanted the British government is the one they should be reporting to, and the one who should protect their interests. And as you also are aware that the majority of the missionaries, etc., and even the officials in Mozambique were Catholic, but most of the missionaries who were initially in Malawi were Protestants. So that was also an issue. But basically, the British government was not interested, among other things. I know many people will not be happy with my statement here, that Malawi was not economically viable. That was the major reason. So the British government felt that sending their administrators to work in Malawi and at a huge cost was not sensible. But the missionaries lobbied, and finally, with the support from John Cicero, who pledged to support the administration, we finally had the boundaries now formalized of current Malawi. And we also, Sir Harry Johnson coming in to lead the British administration in 1891. But now, I was giving this background because the British government was looking at the financial cost. So it didn't want to bring so many administrators in Malawi and have a huge cost. So there was an issue, as you know, indirect rule was something that was experimented in Nigeria and other places. And that was a concept that was also brought in Malawi, that let us use these local structures. So because we are few, the government, the British government had few personnel. So they said, let us not disturb the local structures. And so indirect rule came in. So its application was not solely in Malawi. It had been applied in other places. So Malawi was not the first place to implement. Lord Lugard is the one who is well accredited for this innovation of indirect rule. Probably in our contemporary context, we can say it's akin to decentralization, probably. Yeah, but so the indirect rule came in. So traditional leaders became prominent as far as British government was concerned of establishing law and order in Malawi. Now, these traditional leaders, there was some kind, whether explicitly or implicitly, there was an issue of making sure that these traditional leaders are loyal to the British administration, which is obvious. They need to be loyal. But now there must be systems put in place to make sure that the traditional leaders must demonstrate that loyalty. So this is where the patronage structures emerged, because the chiefs were intermediaries. So they were given, there were laws that were established by 1912, decentralization, local government, etc., all those things. But the whole system was structured in such a way that it gave chiefs and their intermediaries the legal authority and some economic benefits and some social immunity. So the patronage system was established at that time. If you read our paper, we are providing that in details, but also there will be other things that I'll be mentioning which are not appearing in our paper because of limitation of number of words. So there are certain things I'll be saying which are not appearing in the book, but and my colleague will also say a number of things that may not appear in the chapter itself. We are taking advantage of this presentation because but of course the challenge is also we have a limitation of time here as well. Everything is limited anyway. So anyway, so what were the patronage structures or systems in the colonial governments? Land allocation based on allegiance, justice systems used to entrench the elite authority, resource distribution served as political rewards, and the colonial state built a foundation of client list networks. As I said, in the next slide, we are explaining this in detail in our chapter. But these are some of the key elements that it made. So our argument is that from 1891, that's the structure. Now, when Dr. Banda came in, as I mentioned, those of you who joined later, when I'm saying one party rule, it doesn't imply that the one party started really in 1964. We have a footnote in our chapter explaining that, making sure that we are not political, historically correct. That I think it's officially 1971 when Malawi was declared. No, that was the life presidency. But I think is it 1966, if I'm not mistaken, when one-party rule was established. But before that, in 1964, we had the multi-party system. So it's not really correct to say that one party started in 1964. I just wanted to clarify that. But now, the system that was established during the Banda regime, which is too obvious unless you are somebody who was born in 2000 and you are not aware, but the history is very clear about the Banda regime. Now, it was built also on the same system of loyalty, making sure that the system, the structures, those who demonstrated loyalty, those who demonstrated that and they were, there's also, if you read the Kid in his book, I mean, not his book, but his paper, he's talking about agriculture, but he's explaining one incident there that I want to cite. He's talking about the issue of how Dr. Banda, he said in his cabinet that because I'm Chikumbe number one, farmer number one, everybody in the cabinet must have a farm. If you don't have money, you don't have, I will make sure you have one. So he ordered, and I underline the word ordered, the banks to make sure that they give soft loans to everybody in the cabinet so that they should have a farm. I said, so I'm just giving that as a small example. But there are so many cases to demonstrate if you demonstrated loyalty. So it's a patron-client type of system that existed. It didn't exist in the same way as it does now, but it was different. But the system, and when we are talking about suppressing dissent, etc., why all that? How is that linked to patron-client system culture? It is linked because the suppression is meant to reinforce the patron-client system or practice or culture. So that is the issue. When you, anyway, what you see on the diagram you see there is trying to explain. So in the book chapter, we are explaining all those elements and how they link it to the patron and client culture that existed during the Banda regime. So it was consolidated, but not dismantled. In other words, previously traditional leaders, but now we see the party in power reinforcing that. Next slide. Okay. Now I'll make sure that I shouldn't go beyond this slide because my colleague is supposed to take over from this slide, but I'll just briefly explain. So before I hand over, so what is important is that remember what we said about the issue of historical institutionalism, that things may, the argument in the theory of historical institutionalism is that the critical juncture is important. So we are bringing in the transition to multi-party system to see whether those elements that were structures that were established during the colonial, reinforced during the Banda regime are still existing, which is our argument that they still exist, but they have just taken a new kind of brand. So let me hand over to my colleague, Maureen. I don't know if I have given you ample time because, as you know, I'm well known for being a poor timekeeper. So over to you, my colleague Maureen. But apologies if I went beyond the required time. My sincere apologies.
All right. Thank you so much, Happy, for setting the ball rolling and providing us with a pretty much comprehensive conceptualization of the issue of political culture. So he has already said a lot. I think what is central to this discussion is that when it comes to Malawi, is that despite the fact that we've had these critical junctions in terms of political transitions or transformations, what has remained constant is the political culture. And the political culture that we are centering on in our discussion is that of patronage politics. Others call it clientelism or neo-patrimonialism. He has explained what that entails. So my humble duty now is just to take you through the multi-party transition, looking at how the political culture has remained the same, or basically maybe the practices have just been modified, but the idea or the practice itself remains the same, in that politics are basically, or our political practices are basically driven by patronage or clientelism. So I think I need not to say most of us who know Malawian politics know that in 1994 we transitioned to become a democracy. But as Happy has already explained, our transition to democracy, by many scholars, it has been described as a transition, but without transformation, especially when we look at the political culture. In other words, mostly this was really perpetuated by the fact that the people that were running the government during the Banda regime are the same people that were also key actors in the democratic dispensation. So we look at the people like Mulusi, who became first multi-party or democratic president, Aleke Banda, who was also a very key, one of the key political actors during the Banda regime. These people are the same people that were also very active in Malawian politics after democracy, or the transition to democracy. And so because of that, the practices that these people practiced before democracy are pretty much the same. So we have there cited a few authors who have written on this. So for instance, in Kandawile, he says that, you know, a large number of our politicians learned their politics at the feet of Banda. And many literally, you have to remind them constantly of the new political dispensation. In other words, they were still practicing the same kind of political practice of patronage politics, to a point that they had to be reminded that, no, you know what, we are in a democracy now, and some of these practices have to be done away with. All right, go to the next slide. So I should not say a lot about this slide because it's pretty much what we have been saying, that, you know, although democracy was introduced, but political culture remained. That is the patronage kind of politics. But the other thing that happened is that because now we are in a multi-party system, which was different from the one-party system, is that now clientelism or patronage politics now became a bit more competitive. It was about who has the power, who has the ability to win more loyalists or loyal supporters of a certain particular party. So that's why we're saying that it was the same practice, but basically just being modified. And that, you know, it is a new political system, which is democracy. And so because of that, it needed new rules, it needed new institutions, or some of the institutions needed to be, wanted to undergo some reformation. But these reforms were often constrained, or it was very hard to set new rules. Why? Because there's this path dependency syndrome now of this political culture. And so the old networks remained, or they were basically just being adapted into the new institutions. And what is happening now is that politicians, those that are now in government, would use state resources basically to control the government, or to control the system, or to win more political support. So what is central here is that although we are having a transition, but the institutions, they're not changing. We are not reforming or whatsoever. So I'll go through some of the, yes, you may go on to the next slide. Thank you. So I'll go over to some of the practices that indicate or demonstrate that indeed nothing is changing despite this critical juncture. One of the first things that has remained constant in our politics is the issue of handouts, or what we would call the handouts culture. So the handouts culture is a system of vote buying in which a person gives handouts to people basically just to buy the vote. So they can give out either cash or materials or whatever. And the person that started this system or started this practice is the first president of democracy himself, Bakili Muluzi. He popularized the handout. So although we have had our legal frameworks that have basically discouraged this practice, but it has been poorly enforced and the system continues. Now, what are the consequences of handouts? You see that one of the major consequences is that there is a weak accountability measures. There are weak accountability, or it weakens accountability, and again, policy is basically sort of disabled in this kind of system. How? Because you see that in most cases, policy is the one that, or basically patronage is the one that drives policy. Policies are made in such a way that this system of patronage politics should be encouraged or should continue to be reinforced. We have the farm subsidy policy in Malawi, which is one of the most famous policies. You realize that when you go through even literature or research that has been done on these policies, it is one of the policies that has really reinforced the practice of patronage politics, whereby even contracts, whether it's procurement or what, they are given to people who are already in the government or those that are loyal to the government. The other implication or consequence of handout is that it promotes dependency or short-termism. In other words, people basically just look forward. If you ask people why they look forward to the voting period, they'll tell you it's when we receive free things. We receive free money. And it's not only the voters, it is even the bureaucrats, the technocrats. Everyone looks forward because they want to benefit from politicians who are willing to dish out whatever they can to win votes. Short-termism, why? Because people do not look forward to hearing the manifestos or hearing what kind of policy change politicians are going to bring after they win the elections. But people are just interested in knowing, what are you going to give us if we are going to vote for you? So that is also a very big problem. And also it encourages corruption and misuse of public funds, especially for those that are already in government, because they have the higher advantage. They're going to use the state resources that are already at their disposal to give out to people. So it encourages corruption because it's a practice that has been embedded into the system. So those that are in government and those that have the ability to get their hands into state resources are going to use that to dish out or give as handouts. So those are the consequences of handouts. Again, what are the cultural underpinnings? So you see that this is a very informal, this political culture is a very informal institution that has also been accepted as being good. Okay, so for those that practice this, they are using it as a way of saying that, you know what, this is us being generous. This is us helping out the people. So I think in the next slide, we'll see some of the arguments that were raised by Bakili Muluzi to really sort of justify the reasons why he gives out handouts. So on the screen there, you also see that there are some paper clippings that we included just to show that the culture of handouts is really recognized and that it is discouraged. But despite all this, it is still practiced. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So as you can see, that is the president that is justifying himself as to why he gives out handouts. See, he's saying that so he considers handouts as an initiative that benefits a lot of Malawians to the extent that when he's questioned, he was able to say that, is it wrong to feed the people? Like, is it wrong? Is it a sin to assist the people? And if it's a sin, then I don't mind going to hell because I cannot allow Malawians to suffer when I have something to give them. That is when people started questioning after realizing that he had spent over 10 million kwacha in handouts and 10 metric tons of maize just giving out to people. So the question is, where are you taking all this? Where are you getting all this money from just to hand out to people? So when questioned, he was able to justify himself and say, no, it is not a sin. What I'm doing is helping the people. Next slide, please. Again, the other platform in which patronage politics is very visible is in local government. You know, we all know that democracy, one of the ways in which democracy is reinforced is through decentralization, where we are giving power to the people. But even at local government, you realize that patronage or clientelism is really practiced, especially through traditional leaders. So our traditional leaders, although they are an informal institution, they're pretty powerful and pretty influential. But because of that, they also use this power to practice patronage politics. How? So we have these, what we call the village district committees or the area district committees, which are committees that have been established at the district level or the village level to, you know, be a platform where people are able to participate in issues that affect them. But you realize that traditional leaders will use even these particular committees or platforms to their advantage. So even at local level, I think Happy already discussed the issue of whereby traditional leaders they have power over resources such as land. So they use this power to get what they want in terms of allocation of land, in terms of setting disputes to do with land or whatsoever. They're always favoring those people who are loyal to them. So this practice, you realize that it transcends down to even the local level. And one of the areas in which patronage politics has also been practiced is through the Constituency Development Fund. Of course, it was removed by the Constitutional Court about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But the Constituency Development Fund, commonly known as the CDF, was under the MPs, the members of parliament, and they have also used the power over this, which is a very large sum of money, about I think about 200 million. It was about 200 million before it was removed from. It is about 200 million now. They used this as a way of controlling people, or they also use the money for handouts, especially during a time like this. So in other words, we are saying that even at the local level, patronage politics is still practiced. Next slide. Yeah, so again, patronage politics is also very visible in the political party. I think I may not go through all of them, but I'll just give a few examples of how political party dynamics also encourage patronage politics. So we have the issue of internal competition whereby even within the party itself, rivalry arises between the different contestants. And those that are able to win even in the political party itself, when we talk about the interdemocracy, or rather the dynamics within the political party, are those that have the ability to control resources. Those that are able to hand out resources are those that are able to, for instance, come on top when it comes to, for instance, primaries within a political party. And also for those that are in government, they use public resources that are at their disposal to be able to win votes or whatsoever. So you realize that within the political party itself, political party dynamics also play a central role when it comes to patronage politics and clientelism. So I'll not go through all that, but I just thought I should just give us the general understanding of how political party dynamics also lead to patronage politics. Move to the next slide, please. Yes, so this is also very interesting. Was also very interesting to us because when the Malawi Law Society tried to bring this issue out of handouts, you see that one MCP, so MCP is ruling out, one MCP, was it minister, was able to justify and say that, you know what, everyone is doing it. Why are you only pointing fingers to us? So I'll read that out. So according to the Nation newspaper entitled "The Malawi Law Society Demands Action in MCP Handouts," dated on 18 July 2024, it stated that Zikali Ngoma and Chicho Labanda, so those are political elites, in total gave out 76.5 million to Southern Region delegates. And when they were asked, see what they're saying that, why are you targeting us when everyone else is doing it? In other words, we are trying to say that this is a practice that has been institutionalized. It is embedded in our culture. We have accepted it. And all we are doing now is saying that, why are you pointing at us and not to the others when all of us are practiced? So in other words, it's a culture that has been accepted. All right, may you move to the next slide? It seems I only have 1 minute. Good. So in conclusion, you can actually see the implications of this political culture. The first one being that we have now a durable path dependency. In other words, this is a culture that has started with the colonialist. It has continued through the Banda regime. It was entrenched through the Banda regime, and then it continues to shape our political system. So in other words, we are not eliminating it, despite the fact that we have institutions, despite the fact that we are reaching very critical junctions in our political systems, but we are just adopting it or modifying it instead of removing it. And God forbid, should we go back to one party era? I think as a prophecy, I can say that even if we were to go to another political system, I think this culture would continue. So what are the implications on governance? You realize that formal democratic institutions alone are insufficient to transform a deeply embedded political culture. As I've already said, although we have all these principles of democracy, whatever, but this culture, it seems like it is here to stay. So we need to call for a broader reform. We need structural, really strong structural reforms if we are to do away with this political culture. But beyond that, I think we need a cultural shift in terms of our own attitudes, apart from just formal institutions that can really help us to do away with this culture, because it has a very bad effect on our our economic growth, our political growth, etc., etc. But also, if we want to understand this, I think historical institutionalism, understanding our history Happy already put it, is very important if we are going to be able to craft better reforms in respect to governance in the future. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation.
Maureen, thank you very much indeed, and happy as well. Maureen, you have judiciously governed your own time there, but I wonder if you would like any more time, or if you're happy with where you managed to reach in your conclusions. You're just muted there, sorry.
Sorry. Sorry.
Okay, there we are.
Yeah, I think I've pretty much presented what we had planned to present, but I'm sure people have a lot of questions. So some of the issues will be coming out from people's questions or comments. Yeah.
Indeed,
but thank you so
indeed.
much. Yeah.
Thank you both very much. I think David Bowen's comment in chat sums it up really well. David says, wonderfully clear, informative and enlightening presentations. And I think, you know, the grounding that you've both given us there for those of us who are not experts in political science is really very, very helpful. We've a question from John Luanda. John, would you like to come in?
Given all the, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, given all the changes that are going on, Generation Z, etc., and your theories of some sort of evolution, my question is, we talk about, you know, the Mkandawiri model, Shabal and all that stuff. Is there no way we can look at our political culture rather than just patron client forever and ever, and see why, given our very feudal system, there's been no Marxist change in Malawi? That's it.
Thank you, John. Happy, Maureen, are you happy to respond to that one?
Maureen, should I take it up?
Yes,
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rwanda. You know, Rwanda has is a living somebody who has a encyclopedia about Malawi. He knows everything about Malawi. I think among the living, probably I would rate him #1 of a person who knows more about Malawi. So thank you so much for that difficult question. Yeah, the patronage client, what you have said is exactly what some scholars have questioned. They have said that probably the client patron type of analysis is archaic, to put it in another. That's not exactly the word they have used, but that's my own wording. They have said that it's archaic. But my view is they are saying it's archaic depending. You see, every system is not exactly the same. So it may be archaic to a particular another system, but in the context of Malawi, our view based on the shortcomings of the other descriptions, the chameleon, whatsoever, our view is that it has still remained and it has been reinforced and it has adapted. That's our view. Should we look for something else? Yes, precisely. That's what we wanted. In fact, we had several options of analyzing the political culture in Malawi from 1964 to the present. But when we looked at all of them, we felt that they were not as effective as it is when you look at what is happening on the ground. So the patron-client analysis, in our view, still remains critical in explaining the overarching political culture of Malawi. So we still remain with this analysis. We feel that describes Malawi political culture better than the other approaches. But should we look for something more? Yes, precisely. That's what we should be doing. And probably it's the debate that we, in scholarship, we like debate. So by using this analysis, probably it will also raise some thinking, just as we also looked at chameleon politics and we felt it is very much limited. And we felt that it doesn't describe the political culture in Malawi accurately. So that's why we discarded it. So unfortunately, the one which is seen as archaic, still in the context of Malawi, is still very accurate. And like it has shortfalls. If we find something better, that would be much good for us. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Happy. Stella Marwitt, would you like to come with your question, please?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm from Ethiopia, Addis Ababa University. So I'm glad to be with you to attend this presentation. So I have one question. So how do you think, what do you suggest embedded political culture can be transformed? So what is your suggestion in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we are saying that it is very hard because these are practices that weaken our institutions. Institutions are very important, and they are basically the building blocks of any good governance. So it is very hard because this, as we are saying, it's embedded within our culture, and to remove a culture or what people believe is right out of their systems, it can be very, very challenging. But what we are saying, that's why people's attitudes need to change. People's attitudes, because we do have the institutions, but this culture is now weakening the institutions. And if it's now weakening institutions, how do we play around it? Now it becomes a challenge. So that's why in the end we are saying that people's attitudes, they need to change. But perhaps Happy can also come in to help me with this. But I think what Malawians need now is a change of attitude towards this kind of a culture. Apart from just reformation or bringing in institutions, because those already exist. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Maureen. You see, we have institutions. The institutions in 1994 that we adopted or embraced were meant to inculcate a new culture. But as Maureen has said, it just goes beyond institutions now. Coming up with the institutions is in public sector reforms, there's a theory which they say they talk about monocropping, which Kandawiri has also highlighted. And there's also, there are several other theories which talk about how institutions have failed to address certain elements that they were supposed to bring transformation. So, but the point is that the attitude which he's talking about, we have institutions like NICE in Malawi, which are doing a good job. Studies have been done, several studies, which we haven't cited in our paper, but NICE National Initiative, NICE represents National Initiative for Civic Education. So NICE has been doing a very good job in Malawi. We are not saying, we are not saying that it has managed to solve everything, but it is doing a good job. So based on surveys, it's not like something that we are just dreaming, but there is evidence on the ground. And so if we support such kind of institutions like NICE, National Initiative for Civic Education, if we put a lot of support in those institutions, they can help bring about that change which Maureen is highlighting. So there are certain areas that can be explored. There was another initiative we established, I think, the Ministry of National Unity. Now it has been disbanded, or it has been merged with another department, with another ministry. But there is a policy, actually, National Unity and whatsoever policy. So if you go through that policy, you see that there were several novel ideas that were put forward. For example, establishment of specific committees at local level, the involvement of traditional leaders at that level, and so on, going up, making sure that the civic education and the new ideas are initiated at that level. As we are speaking now, because that policy came out, I think, is it 2 years ago or so, and these committees have just started being established now. So if we look, maybe we have some hope that if we move from below, rather than top down, but coming from below, because that's what the policy is trying to encourage. So I've talked about NICE and also this initiative. I think those are some of the initiatives that we need to put more resources, more effort to address the issue of attitude and so on that Maureen has highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you both. Rebecca Foster, thank you for your question. I think that quite a lot of it's probably been answered, but would you like to follow up at all with any supplementary question?
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really fascinating. I think, as you say, my question has been answered, but perhaps you have any examples of other countries that have been able to promote democracy, and whether there's any solutions in looking at other places and structures that could help reform or promote more honest democracy in Malawi. Thank you.
Happy, can you take that one?
Yeah, you see, what happened is Maureen suggested exactly what you are saying, that in our paper we should not we should not be seen as if we are too narrow to Malawi. Why don't we look at other countries and so on? She suggested that. But unfortunately, maybe because I am professor, I bulldozed that we shouldn't have that section. So, but but she suggested exactly what you are saying. But my argument was that do we really need, because we needed that analysis at just the political culture prevailing at the continental level, and then we zoomed at Malawi. But we didn't have specific case studies, as Maureen suggested, that probably that can be an area that is important to look at, and we didn't look at that. But you are reinforcing what we already discussed, that maybe we needed a few case studies where they were able to work on this challenge and addressed it, assuming we find some with a similar kind of, so we didn't look at it, but I think it is an important point, and I think we just need to go back, and that's why Maureen said, can you pick it up? Because I needed to defend that. Why did we remove that, or why didn't we consider that? But because I think it might be important, but we didn't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Happy. Mavuto Bamusi, you've patiently had your hand up. Thank you. May we turn to you, please?
Thank you very much. I have a straightforward question. Given the role of various actors in Malawi's critical junctures, you talked about the religious institutions, the faith institutions. Now we have the civil society as a key actor, especially in Malawi's democratization process. When one looks at the role of civil society activists in the 2020 critical juncture, the protest and the demonstration, NGOs and CSOs have got a continued role to play. But now my question is about within the context of the politics of chameleon politics. Do you think that civil society is a new breed of chameleons in town? Thank you.
Wow. I think that's what we keep on saying, that unfortunately, this political culture is very, if it was a disease, we would have said that it spreads very quickly. And not only across political elites or political actors, but even towards other, CSOs or non-governmental actors or non-state actors, as we can call them, the religious actors, the CSOs. Yes, we have CSOs and they're very active, but what we can notice in Malawi is that most CSOs are running towards fighting the government, in a bit of an aggressive way, I can say. That's why you rush to the streets and go for demonstrations. Yes, there are a few HCSOs like NICE, as I have already put it, that whose agenda is towards also towards changing the attitudes of the people. But most CSOs, unfortunately, they're very aggressive in their approach towards change. And so it just comes out as if maybe they are also just running towards wanting a piece of the cake of the state resources. So we have also seen it happening in Malawi, whereby CSOs who start off with a very good agenda or a very good goal, now changing their colors with their stripes, visibly what we are seeing it happen, because now they have been, or the disease, or they have been infected by the disease of this political culture. So yes, CSOs are there, but they're not as effective as we can say towards changing this political culture, mostly because they become part of the culture in due time. But as usual, I always ask Happy to weigh in because he's the professor.
You're just muted, Happy. We're starting to run out of time, so if I could ask you to make your remark quite brief, please, and then we'll turn to Ziwandiri.
The issue is that I think when you're talking about civil society, probably see the weak, as we are speaking now, it's at the time when our civil society is very, very weak. After 2020, the rerun, it's so weak that indeed this has shifted, and it may reinforce the chameleon type of culture that was England and others highlighted. So I agree with you. If I had the time, I was going to explain why is it that way. And even the religious groups, how they have behaved and their role. I would quickly say that even a religious group are not cannot play a good role in addressing this one now. Civil society, so that's an issue that I agree with you in short. Thank you.
Thanks, Happy. Definitely whetting everybody's appetite to read the book. Ziwandiri, may we turn to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. Very quick questions for Maureen. On the issue of the handouts and political finance in general. Why is it that there has been no improvement on political parties being more accountable for the sources of their funding that they use to dish out these handouts? And also, has there been any difference in the behavior of both the ruling parties and the opposition in as far as dishing out these handouts is concerned, as well as being accountable for the sources of their funding? Thank you, Chair.
Very, very interesting questions. I think it has also been a debate here in Malawi as to the question of where do political funding come from. and especially for those that are handing out large numbers of, I mean, a lot of money or materials as a handouts. Where do they get this funding from? So it's an easy question. I think it's interesting, a bit challenging, but also easy to answer because there is no accountability. The difficult part is that there is no accountability or even transparency as to where party funding comes from. But all I can say is that for those that are in government, it is obvious what they're using as state resources. I think I've already said that in the presentation, that they use state resources as their party funding. So the handouts that they are given are basically just state resources. Now, it may not come out as directly as them dipping into the pockets of the state account and giving out. It comes out in the forms of subsidy, short-term policies or social policies, subsidy policies that are acceptable by national standards or state standards. But you can actually see that these are short policies. They don't have much impact on this socioeconomic development, but they are loved by the people. So if you give people, that's why we also talk about the issue of short-termism as being an implication, because social policies such as subsidies, they are loved by people. In Malawi, which is a poor country, you give them fertilizer, it is a handout. For me, I would say that it is a handout. But then it just looks like any other policy. So accountability, no. Transparency, no. When it comes to the opposition, they have their own funding, but the culture remains the same between those that are in government and those that are in the opposition. The culture of handouts is the same. So we are approaching towards elections, and I would say that, can you please be on the lookout, follow the events, the process, especially during the campaign. You realize that there's no one who is checking the other. Basically everyone is just handing out whatever they can find. So yeah, on the government side, yes, we know that they are dipping into the national pocket, the state pocket. On the opposition side, wherever they get their funding from, accountability, transparency from where they get the funds, it is not really clear. I think because it also stems back to the issue of having weak institutions, weak mechanisms of transparency and accountability. Yeah, thank you.
Really interesting questions and answers. Thank you, Maureen. Linda Denville, if you could be brief, please.
Sorry, I'm speaking on mute. Thank you so much. I was just interested in your presentations and very elaborate presentations as well. Thank you so much. My question was, did you ever consider, the influence of social media in Malawi? We've seen the boom of social media and how this is actually affecting the political culture in Malawi in your study. Thank you.
A quick response on that one. Yes, there are papers which have been written. There's a Jimmy Kainja and the others. So many have written about the role of social media but basically our analysis, remember what I said, our analysis starts from 1964. Of course, we went also beyond that because of historic constitutionalism. And we wanted to establish an overarching political culture. And remember what I said in the challenges of political culture, that some of the cultures that there was a table we showed that there are several cultures being explained by several scholars, but most of them are limited to a particular period. And our concern, our analysis was to focus on an overarching political culture that has prevailed over a long period of time. So social media may have had an impact on the political culture that the patronage client type. So social media is playing a key role in trying to change the people's idea, but we have to be very cautious because it's either positive or negative. For example, there was a certain well-known political leader in Karonga when there were local government elections, by-elections in Karonga, and it was the MP, I think a member of parliament, they were legislative by-elections in Karonga. So this well-known politician was dishing out cash to supporters, and somebody took that on camera, and it went viral on social media. So it is enhancing the issue of accountability, as Maureen was highlighting. So somehow transparency, accountability, people have started questioning, what are you doing about this? Are you allowing this person to dish out money to supporters like that? And so on. But so the same social media it can also do a lot of damage because there's fake news, as you are aware. Sometimes they have even taken a politician somewhere uttering certain statements which he didn't even utter, but using deep whatsoever AI, and it's all over social media. But that person never said those things. So social media is it can be good or bad. It has an impact. It's something that we are still learning how good it can be in politics. So we can't dismiss it, but we didn't interrogate it because its impact has not yet been seen in terms of patronage client relationship. We think it hasn't yet manifested enough for us to give it a lot of space. But in the short term, yes, it is changing some dynamics. Thank you.
Abby, thanks very much. In the interests of time, and with apologies to Ken and to Richard for not having come to your questions, if their speakers are happy with this, we'll put the questions to the speakers and we'll include the answers in the chat log, which will be sent around to all participants after the event. But just with time in mind, we need to draw to a close. We could clearly continue for really some time with the level of interest that there is in it. So thank you so much to you, Maureen, and to you, Happy, and to everybody for joining in this event today. Thanks to my colleagues Chad and Dorothy and Naseem for making things happen at this end. The next webinar in this series is Building the Malawi Nation, a historical stock-taking late 1950s to the present, and that's on the 18th of June. Starting at 3 o'clock UK time, 4 o'clock Malawi time. And that's with Dr. Gift Wasambo Kaira, Dr. Paul Chiudzo Banda. But for now, thank you, Happy, thank you, Maureen, and to everybody for joining us. That's the end of this one. Do take care. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks indeed.